All right, what do we do?
All right.
All right. Just getting this thing started, like I think the wild, interesting path that this whole thing has been on, right? So, from the earliest days of AIQ, like when you were doing AIQ in here and setting this place up originally, to when we came along and then took over and you and I we renovated this whole space. That's probably like the easiest place to like start at, and like kind of like the evolution of like how training now meets how like there's these two paths, the paths of training and the paths of recruitment, really are intended to align at some point, right?
Right.
The coaching elements in both places drive people towards their intended goal. And I think when we're talking about this stuff, that's the most interesting parallel paths where these things kind of cross, right? Your boys are an excellent example of it, right? Your training methodology that you use through your life being a competitive athlete and being an elite coach brought your boys into a world that most kids don't get to see at an early age, right? They were introduced to a different aspect of sports and youth sports that my kids or other kids wouldn't have been introduced to. And through that, you really get to see how when that intention is paved with your training, with your skill work in your chosen sport, and with the proper coaching, you can achieve greater things. Part of what we see in here with youth athletics and youth training is obviously that intent factor, right? Most of the kids come in here, the intent of it is to have us solve the problem for them versus us providing them the avenue for them to solve the problem, right?
I think, one thing that's interesting about this space, before we get into the rest of it, was that we were lucky to agree. I was lucky, my boys were lucky. This space happened to open up when Ryan was in 6th grade, and so it was a natural segue to the stuff that we were already doing. I was already researching a ton and trying to find the best way to develop athletes. That was a passion for me. And then it was just applying it in a new space and having a blank canvas. So when we built this lab, when we built this studio, it was based on all the technology that was available at the time, and then the best practices. And so from looking at a variety of different people who were training, and kind of taking all of the best practices that were, kind of available and what people knew, and then applying that to something very specific, right? Which started off as training the middle school athlete, and then eventually the high school athlete. And so I think the thing that happened for my boys was there was just this coincidence that we happened to have a training space, that they happened to have a dad who had played at a very high level and also had a passion for player development and athletic development. And I think with a lot of athletes, what you see is they're chasing player development, right? Whether it's baseball, whether it's soccer, basketball, even football to some degree, certainly lacrosse. They spend all their time in the sport, playing the sport. And for me, I knew that my boys, if they wanted to be elite, if they had their own dreams, right? Them playing at high level ACC schools wasn't necessarily my dream. We shared that dream and they had a passion for it, and that's why it worked. Mm-hmm. But coming in here and knowing that and having an opportunity to become better athletes was the key to their success. It was becoming stronger, becoming faster, becoming more agile, improving their reaction time. For me, I knew I was fortunate that I had learned while they were in middle school that those things were going to be really a key to becoming elite athletes, right? And once you're an elite athlete, it's a lot easier to become an elite player of
100%.
Whatever the sport is.
100%. And that is, I think, a huge missing point, at least in what parents understand when they're thinking about, hey, how can I help my kid express this love of the sport that he's having or that he's presenting at an early stage? How can I help him? And I think a lot of times they fall into that trap of like, let me get him a lacrosse specific coach if it's lacrosse, and we're going to just drown in that, and we're going to look at the elite kids and follow that elite kid path. Whereas that skill building of strength, speed, agility, reactivity, all of those elements together are what give you the tool set to be able to be that elite athlete.
And elite athletes, like the more you look at it, and now I'm dealing with a lot of kids who want to go play college sports. on this recruiting roadmap that I do, and I'm talking to parents who want their kids to be college athletes. What's missing with so many of them? They have no strength program. They are not. They're highly skilled, and maybe they have some IQ. They play a ton of lacrosse, right? But they're not training to be stronger athletes. And ultimately, when they come up short, if they don't reach their goal, it's not for a lack of lacrosse ability. It's for a lack of athletic ability. 100%. And so for me, if I could tell people one thing, if they want to have a player that's going to be recruited at a high level to play a college sport, you can't just focus on the skill of basketball, the skill of soccer, the skill of football, the skill of lacrosse, the skill of field hockey. You've got to become a stronger athlete, right? And when you become stronger, you become more athletic. Right. And when you become more athletic, you become a better player in whatever sport it is that you want to play. And I think people miss that. They miss that,
100%. They treat the strength training or the sports performance training as the secondary to the sport. We in here at Athletic IQ, the way everything seems to work is that they come to us as the secondary. I can't train this week. I have to go to my 5th club team's tournament that I'm going to be at, so there'll be no training this week. And out of a 6-week summer program that you lay out for an athlete to get him ready, stronger for their fall season of their sport, they may only actually make 2 to 3 weeks out of that in total because of commitments to the sport themselves that draws them away from it. And that time away is a big suck on that skill building ability of strength or speed or agility or reactivity.
Well, the other thing that happens is they don't actually make any progress. It's very hard to make progress if you're not committed to it, right? One of the things that I learned early on with physical training and lacrosse training to a certain degree, if you're not testing it, if you're not measuring it, and if you're not consistent, you're not going to improve. You can maintain, you can make very, very small gains, but every time you miss a session, every time you miss a week, every time you prioritize playing a sport over developing as an athlete, ultimately you lose, right? And I think kids are overscheduled with their sports teams, and that's not going to be enough to make them an elite player, to have them become a player that's recruitable in college. You have to be a great athlete, right? There's no exception in the world of college athletics where someone is not a great athlete. And I think we're so focused on, as a society, I think the main thing that people do is they think, let me play this sport more, instead of let me become a better athlete. Let me make sure that my training is prioritized. And my boys now, when I watch them, they don't miss a day in here. They come in, if they come home late, and they've become very strong and very athletic, but it's been extremely intentional. It's become something that over the course of time they've learned to love, right? Training isn't always fun.
No, it's not always fun.
And it's not always easy, and sometimes, it's a lot more fun to play a sport.
Sure.
But the way that we do it in here, and one of the things I love about the Athletic IQ Lab is that this is a fun place to train.
Right.
With the technology, right? With the music, you've got an incredible environment. It kind of has like a downtown Soho studio feel to it. And kids get in here, and when they're training with other athletes that are working hard and have a common goal, I think that energy is different. And for me, that was always what I was trying to create here was, let's get kids in here with the same goals. They don't have to be chasing the same dream, but wanting to get better and learning to support each other and learning to become teammates in training. And I think when you have that, all of a sudden kids want to show up and they want to be here because the environment and the energy is contagious.
Right. The vibe up in here, and very intentional, right? We talked about it at the early days of this. Was like, hey, we're in the second floor, we're in the attic. It's like it's that loft kind of vibe. You got your own special place to train. Whether you're a boy, whether you're a girl, you can find an opportunity in here to make this place your own and get your training in here. And we've adapted the training over the years to now to really hone into those individual athletes, where at first we were in more of a group environment. Now we're really started taking that autonomy that an athlete needs to get. You have to be able to show up consistently and do it on your own. That part has to be you to get here, versus like a group mentality where we got to drag you in here to get you to do that training. And the athletes, when they are working together, when you get multiple teammates in here and they have that shared goal and they have their individual program and they're building towards something, man, it could be really special and it could really amplify quickly. But as you were saying, like that consistency thing is the number one thing. Right. You can do, many people can program training, right? That's not a complex thing in today's world to get a good program. But to get somebody to buy into that program, show up consistently to that program, and do the things that happen in the other 20-something hours of that day is the most important element of that training thing, right? That time when you're in here training, to being done intentionally, having a good progressive program, super important. The consistency, though, of showing up every day and doing something is paramount. The kids don't progress.
The app that you created, though. I mean, what's really cool about the app is that you actually have someone holding you accountable, whether you come in physically or not. There's someone on the other end of the line. I think one of the things I learned as a parent, and this is probably good advice for parents that are, have a dream of, it can't be your dream, right? It can't be you dream that your kid's going to be a Division I athlete or an ACC athlete or whatever the case might be. You can share the dream. You can want it as bad as they do. You can't want it more. But it gets hard when the parent is constantly asking the kid to go train and is the person holding them accountable. And I found that even for myself when my boys were younger and we talked about training, like I didn't want to be the guy that was making them lift or holding them accountable or asking them, hey, did you lift today? Did you? And so I would have loved it if they could have had an app or they could have been connected to someone like you who's on the other end of the line saying, hey, did you do this today? Did you make any adjustments? How did you feel? What can we change, right? And then programming it 100%. With specialization so that with that periodization concept, we're moving up closer to the season. Here's what you should be focused on. I didn't have that, right? And I think that's something that's really cool with what you built, is built-in accountability that doesn't come from the parent. And then also knowing what phase the athlete should be in and what they should be training when, so that they're hitting peak performance at the right time. I don't think that enough families understand how important that is.
Yeah, they don't. And it's a really good topic, like that peak performance thing, right? And we have this conversation all the time where let's call it longevity in the sport, right? When you're a young athlete, you're getting ready for each season. And we have a periodization program where we're breaking down. Let's just say we have 12 weeks to the start of our season. Okay, what are we going to do throughout that 12-week period to get you optimized at that moment to be ready to play on the field so that you can be durable on the field, so you can stay on the field. Missing time as a young athlete,
absolutely
paramount, right? That'll take you out miss a year of your 5 years of playing. There's a big deal. And getting you ready physically for the demands of that sport. And also keeping you training when you're in season so that you can maintain those elements.
I can't tell you enough how important the in season is. I've learned that as a coach, right? As a father, and certainly as someone who's working with a lot of athletes, the in season training is the first thing to go.
First thing to go.
When kids have worked so hard, let's say coming up to the fall season as we're about to, and these kids are in here grinding to become faster and stronger and more physically fit. And they've done everything they possibly can, and as soon as the sport starts, it falls off. Now, you don't have to do the same level of training or the same intensity, but maintaining that is probably the most important piece. And I think for most families, that's the one that they let go. And all of a sudden, the athlete goes from starting the season in a great spot to all of a sudden, tailing off. And by the time they get to playoffs, there is no more strength. The speed is back to what it was before they started, and they've lost everything that they worked for, and that constant yo-yo of build it, lose it, just being consistent, getting in once or twice a week makes a huge difference, and it keeps them healthy, and it keeps them strong, and it allows them to maintain whatever performance improvements that they've earned over the course of time. And so that's one bit of advice that I would certainly give parents is try to get them in once or twice a week. Make it a priority, even if it's Sunday and Wednesday, right? And you can lower the intensity and the volume of the training, but you need that training, and your child has earned it. They've worked their butts off to get stronger, faster, quicker, and more athletic. You can't let them lose it because they're too busy or because they're going for a private lesson in a sport. That is the most important thing.
Yeah, we've done videos countless times talking about how it does drop off when you stop doing it. Strength will stick around for a while. You'll maintain that 1 rep strength, let's say for around a month. But the power aspect of it, so that velocity and how you're moving that way, the explosion that you want to see on the field, that's diminishing at 7 to 14 days right off the bat. So parents out there, when you're thinking about your kid's training and you're like, wow, I got him to train all off season, little Johnny needs to rest during the season because his practice schedule is so intense. You're missing out on the fact that you've built this foundation, and I need to maintain that foundation. The wear and tear of a season will bring all those elements down quickly. We will get slower. We will lose our explosivity. We will lose our strength in that 3-month period that program is going on. But as you're saying, if we can show up for 1 day, 2 days a week, come in, hit those foundational movements, touch those foundational skills, give them a taste, let the body react to it, adjust to that adaptation, and then get out of here and get that rest and recovery, get that sleep, get that nutrition, get that recovery time, whatever you got to do mentally and physically to be ready to play on the field. But being back in that training room is paramount to being successful. And not just for getting a Division I scholarship or playing at an ACC school, an SEC school, but for just being able to feel good and play good at the level that you aspire to.
And all of that also feeds into the injury prevention, right? Which is the hamstring injuries that we're seeing now, the knee injuries that we're seeing now, the stress fractures that we're seeing now in athletes that, I think kids are playing sports more. I think that's part of it. But we're seeing more.
They're playing one sport more, so they're getting those overuse injuries.
Specialization
in that same
is
spot.
causing a lot of those injuries, stress fractures in particular. But what you touched on, the rest and the recovery, right? That's not just sleep, but also allowing your body the time to recover from whatever, when you play a sport, when you train, you're breaking down the muscle, and then it needs time for the body to rebuild, to repair. And the other piece that I love that you guys have in the app, and I wish I had this growing up, and even my boys, the nutrition. Mm-hmm. You're prescribing to them and talking about what they should be eating, talking about the protein and the carbs and sugar and how those impact your body, the way that your body is able to repair, the muscle growth, and also your performance, right? The fuel that goes into your body that allows you to be a great athlete, the fact that you guys are covering that and allowing them to learn that, right? So you've got rest, you've got recovery, you've got nutrition. Those pieces are equally important in allowing an athlete to be successful and also allowing them to stay injury-free throughout a season.
100%. And you can see it, there's probably nothing more distressing as a coach when you watch a kid come into a training session and he's just dragging ass walking through the door and you're like, you didn't sleep last night, you practiced late, you had the overscheduling problem that is probably an epidemic problem with the kids of this generation, and that's probably us as parents, our faults. But you see these kids when they show up at these training sessions, and they don't got the gas in the tank to do it. So they come in here, and now that training session is diminished, and now that practice session is diminished after that, and it's that snowball effect going down the hill. You need to have that time in here. The nutrition element is massive, right? Look, and I know being a parent is not an easy thing, and feeding a family, especially if you have a large family, and everyone's different dietary needs and likes and dislikes.
Yeah, mom's diner.
Yeah, mom's diner. Mom at the times wants to strangle all of her kids at the end of the day. Yeah. And if you're now as a coach, you're saying, hey mom, these are the things that she'd be eating, and you're like, you don't understand. He doesn't eat anything but chicken nuggets, Right. We understand that, but you got to find that way to optimize that kid. If that kid's going to be doing that, it's paramount to their performance because you need a kid to be ready to go when they're ready to go. If they don't have that energy, there's no way that they're going to be able to maintain that consistency. And then you start seeing all those snowballing effects coming downhill. That injuries pop up, the overuse injuries from athletes that are in a single specific sport. You're always going to be running that same path. You could probably, speak to it as a lacrosse coach. There's going to be things that you do regularly in your movements, whether you're an offensive player or defensive player. And if you're just doing that all year round, that stop and go moment and that exact same thing, that exact same angle on your kneecap, that exact same movement with your shoulder or your elbow, things are going to start to break down. That's where playing multiple sports really comes in. You're not training the muscle to adapt to different types of movements. So now if that lacrosse player is playing basketball, he's going to have a different movement pattern that he's going to bring into it, and that'll aid him playing lacrosse. If he's going to be a football player, he's going to have certain movement patterns that are going to just be ingrained. We're going to get these overuse injuries that are going to pop up. So doing other things like wrestling or basketball or lacrosse or baseball or whatever, maybe even just playing pickup games in that off season is so important, and it keeps that brain fresh too.
I think we as a family, we love the idea of playing multiple sports. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. You were a 3-sport athlete in high school, and I don't think it's very easy to do that now because of specialization. It's very hard to be a part-time wrestler, right? You can't just wrestle in wrestling season. Football still is more fall-based, but football coaches demand a lot. But if you can find 2 sports that you play in different seasons, even that gives you a break, right? And it allows you to move differently, to train differently. I think we see a lot of mental fatigue in athletes, not just the physical fatigue from playing the same sport. I also think we see a mental side where it's exhausting doing the same sport over and over and over again,
yes.
Playing for the same coach, doing the same drills. And the other thing I'll say about playing a different sport is it gives them a break. And so I'll tell you a quick story about my 3 boys. I have 3 sons. My oldest is going to be a senior at UVA. My middle guy is going to be a sophomore at Duke, and my youngest is going to be a senior in high school. My intensity as a parent, I dialed it back with each one. And by the time Christopher came along, who's my 3rd, he's done the least. If anything, he's been undertrained. Probably has the most passion for the game.
Yep.
He probably has the most excitement. He still can't wait to go play in a lacrosse tournament or to go to a
physical
cross
tool
practice.
wise, he's grown massively, and his frame is incredible.
We've been smart about it. We've been smarter. I mean, every parent is going to learn throughout the process, right? I don't expect that we're going to just all of a sudden be able to know what we're supposed to do. And I think when you're in it, when you've got a family and you're working with individual athletes within your family, you learn something every time, right? With my son Ryan, he by far did the most. He would have had the highest probability for injury because he worked so hard. Mm-hmm. We didn't focus enough on rest and recovery. Right. With Kyle, who's my middle guy, we kind of started to understand that. He was very, very explosive and was a very different athlete than Ryan was. Ryan was more linear, very, very high IQ. Kyle was very quick, very explosive. And then Christopher's kind of a combination of those two, but he's definitely trained the least. He's become very strong because we've been consistent, but it hasn't been high volume. I think that's what parents miss. It's the consistency that builds an athlete. It's not the volume. It doesn't have to be 3 or 4 days a week all year long, right? You can ramp it up to 3 days a week. I know for a fact, all 3 of my boys, the most that I ever let them train was 3 strength training days a week. And then the rest of that time, we might have done some plyo work and some agility and some speed or some sport-specific movement. But at the end of the day, they lifted 3 times a week and twice a week in season with a heavy day and a light day.
All of our programming in here, 3 days of strength training, and that's the max of what we prescribe to a youth athlete. Part of it is time allotment, right? I mean, when we're on these tight schedules, I try to keep a workout to 45 to 60 minutes, 3 days a week for the strength-specific programming.
Right.
Then we'll work on elements of power, elements of speed, elements of agility in those other days, and then just some natural play days of just having some fun.
Right.
But
yeah, I think
can't say it enough, man. I think the consistency is it.
We're missing fun, right? Athletes are missing movement that is so. One of the things that we've learned over the course of time is that when we talk about reacting, right? Players reacting and mental processing during a game. It can't be, people think the speed ladder is teaching you agility. Agility is a response to a stimulus, right? And the speed
ladder is learning dance steps.
The speed ladder is just learning, you're learning a dance, mm-hmm. right? You're learning to put your feet, there is no reaction to a speed ladder. So you do develop, maybe your feet can move a little bit quicker in a specific pattern, but the gameplay, right? And the reactivity, that's what we love about using the lights in here. The Sport React is fantastic for that, right?
Yep.
Teaching athletes
even just the old school ball drills of just dropping a ball and having to react to a stimulus.
We used to call it dog park. We would throw a ball and the kid would have to, try to catch it by the first bounce.
Yep.
Anything where an athlete is moving in response to a stimulus is going to help them with their mental processing in game. I've seen it a ton. I've even seen it as a professional coach. You've got these players that are so fast, right? They're phenomenal athletes, but their brain can't process as fast as their body can move. So they do a really good job of getting in trouble faster, and their brain can't keep up.
Yeah.
So what winds up happening is
it's like a blank spot between the first step and where they end up. They're missing something.
They get in trouble before they realize they're going to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's where the cognitive processing and the cognitive training helps a lot, is that you learn to process faster. Right, and I think that's what's coming next, right? It may not be, you know, in the small amount of time that we've been doing it, we've seen a big change. But learning to process and learning to think and move faster and more efficiently is going to change athletes and have a greater impact on them than almost anything else. So when you combine, you know, the speed portion and the strength and the agility, when you combine the ability to think faster and move faster and react faster, you're going to see major improvements in the athlete in every sport. And I think that's what's next, right? That's what's coming down the line. And we've been doing that in here for a while. And it's not an easy thing to train, but it has a huge impact on athletes. I know we're one of the few places that's probably offering that type of training. But it's just kind of a cool, you know, to look at this as being, you know, kind of like the next frontier of training is also pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, because in the past, without the technology element in there, right, it was really dependent upon a coach. Now with the technology in here, we can get that reactive element into almost all elements of training. I mean, there's points where we bring it even into the weight room, where you're just reacting to a stimulus. You're making that athlete have to process something and do it in a quick and efficient manner. That is a skill just like building that strength. You have to build that noggin, that processing that's going on in there. And like you said, there's too many athletes that are focused on either just the gameplay, just the strength element, and they're missing that portion of it. And there's not an agility drill that's done in here or a speed drill that's done in here that doesn't have some form of a reactive element in there.
How many times have you had a parent tell you, or you watch an athlete, or you're speaking to a parent, and they say, he's such a good athlete, or she's such a good athlete, but I don't know, it doesn't translate. Well, the reason that it doesn't translate is because of the cognitive processing, right?
100%.
It's some of it's IQ and understanding the game that can be developed, you know, in a different way.
And by the way, some kids are born with different tool sets, right? They have a different tool set.
Every single player is a combination of skill sets. When you look at all the different things that you could be, you know, as an athlete, right? You could be strong, you could be fast, you could be quick, you could be smart. You could understand the game well, right? You could have fast processing. Strong athletes and athletes that are successful typically have at least two of those that are their superpowers, right? When I talk to an athlete and try to explain to them, even the guys when I was coaching pro, I would say, what's your superpower? I'd be like, Coach, what are you talking about? Your superpower is what's your one thing? Like for me, it was strength, right? I was pretty quick. I was fast enough. Neither of those things were going to make me elite. I was able to use my body well, and I was strong, and I had certain skill, right? So those were two things. I had more strength than most of the players I was playing against, and I had skill that allowed me to score goals, right? That's really what it came down to. Most athletes have a superpower. It might be linear speed, it might be quickness, it could be strength, right? But then they also have to have a component within the sport. So the skill development piece is really important, but it's not enough. Being skilled in one sport, being able to dribble and shoot a basketball will not be enough to make you a great basketball player. The same way that shooting a lacrosse ball or throwing and catching with both hands is not going to make you a great lacrosse player. That's why the superpower is something physical that you do, right? Your 100%. Superpower is, you know, am I explosive? Am I a speed person? You know, am I strong? Whatever it is, and every kid is usually, if they wouldn't call it a superpower, they're closer to that.
They're close to that,
right? Like for me,
and you do fall back to that superpower. You can watch a kid when they know what their superpower is. They'll fall back to that quicker than they'll fall to the skill that's less developed.
They know physically. If you played a tag game, right, you can see if the kid has quickness, do they have speed, right? You're not going to see strength in tag, obviously.
Right.
But, you know, depending on
unless you're a bully.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I think the hardest thing for kids is understanding that you can improve every bit of your physicality. You can become stronger, you can become faster, you can become quicker, but to a certain degree, right? And so you've got to leverage those. And sometimes for us, we look at when we do testing with athletes, sometimes the best place to start is the worst. Right, we might be able to improve quickness a little bit, but that may have the biggest impact on an athlete that's already fast and already strong. Yeah. Or we might have a kid who's really quick who has really low strength. So instead of trying to make the quickness even better, we might say, man, what you're really going to need is to develop some strength. That's going to help you to become a better athlete.
Back to the play thing, because we glossed over the play thing, but how important that play element is. And this came, actually, it happened in here yesterday. I had 2 athletes that were training, one college football player, one elite high school hockey player and lacrosse player. And both of them were a little banged up, getting ready for the season for the football player and finishing 2 club seasons for the hockey and lacrosse player. And they were a little sore. So I said, one of the things we're going to add to your program is just a half hour of play on the floor before your training, even on your rest days and even on your training days. So both of them just went out onto the little turf area we have here, and they just rolled around on the floor. I just said, do whatever you feel good doing on the floor, roll around, shoulder rolls, hip throws, throw your body around however you feel. Where something feels stiff, play with it. After a half hour, they came back into the training room as completely different kids. Both of them felt energized because they kind of had a good time, right? They weren't so like, oh, I got to go do this deadlift or this back squat or whatever the exercise may have been. They were able to just go out there, relax, let their body move, and then they were able to return to the play with a different mindset to it. And that was a game changer. And it was something that I instantly went and applied to all the other programs that we're doing as a way of like, hey, on your rest day, instead of a rest day where I had you going for, take your dog for a walk, help your parents out, it turned into, hey, just go into your basement floor, go into your family room and just play around and roll around. Go outside, play spike ball with your brother in the backyard, right? Get these movements in there that aren't, that don't have the stress element attached to them of training or competitive play.
Yeah, it's almost like an active recovery, right? It's a means to allowing your body to move to get back to
you're tricking the brain into getting you out of that one mindset and getting into another. And then there comes that recovery component, which is so important.
The other thing that we didn't talk about, which was something that we found early on with my boys and something that I learned, and I'm a huge fan of Mike Boyle, who's a phenomenal strength coach up in Boston. He's got a huge following. But he does a lot with mobility, right? Functional movement and mobility. So a lot of the stuff that we do in here, we talk about, learning to work on opening up your joints, right? Learning to be more flexible. Some of those things that we don't have time to focus on, the majority of the kids that come in here are doing some element of a mobility training to start, whether they're working on opening up their hips, whether they're working on, getting their ankle joints, better. Right. A lot of them have tight shoulders, so we're working on that. But all of those things are kind of go hand in hand with that active recovery.
They do. They go hand in hand. And in a good program, you're building those into all elements of that program, right? That's part of when we talk about like program customization for an athlete. It's what that individual athlete needs, and it's giving them those foundational movements, whether your squat, your hinge, your push, your pull, your rotate, your carry. Those elements, those are in each and every program because they're sort of paramount to physical fitness and movement. But then within those, we're doing all of these accessory type movements that are specific to the individual athlete. If you have a hip problem, we see hockey players, hip problems. We see baseball players, shoulder problems. We see football players, hip, knee, quad tendon type issues, right? All these overuse injuries that come into play. That's where we can really work on those elements in there, and there's room within a well-conditioned program. Now, if you're doing a generic program that's not specific to you, they could still be in there. There can be elements in there, but they're not going to be maybe specific to your sport or specific to your physical need at that point. But those are very, very important elements in there, and that sort of goes into why we want to focus on certain days doing that foundational work, and then other days where we're working on that accessory stuff, and then getting that active play, recovery, and nutrition in there.
I keep coming back to the questions that I get so often from parents is, how do I make this work? How do we do everything, right? How do we fit in strength training? Like I talk a lot about, you have to get stronger. You have to be in the weight room, right? Middle school kids, that doesn't mean that you're going to be hang cleaning and doing powerlifting. You've got to learn to train. You've got to learn to lift weight. You've got to challenge your body. The stress that you put on your body allows your body to grow. It makes you a better athlete in the long term. But the key is, most of the time, you're spending too much time training for a singular sport. And for me, when I look at my boys and their development, each one did less and less of that, right? To the degree that we could afford to do that. A lot of times high school practice is demanding that seat. So we would try to lift on Sundays and we would try to lift on Wednesdays, right? That Wednesdays would be after practice. and Sundays would be once they woke up. Let them sleep and get the recovery. And Sunday we would do the heavy day. And I just think there's a way to do it. You just have to prioritize the training. You have to understand that it's important. You've got to make it a priority, and you have to work together with your athlete to make sure that they get it done. Right? The athlete can't do it by themselves. Most of the athletes that we train aren't necessarily going to drive themselves here, or they need your help. As a parent, if you can start to think about a little bit more well-rounded athlete, and you're going to give them support in becoming a better athlete off the field, right? Which means getting in here and lifting, or doing it at home using the app, another way to do it, right? Wherever it is that you're going to get your
gym, or even just getting outside and doing the movements in the right way. There's ways to get the training in, folks, when you can't physically get to the facility. There is time in the day to get it done. And if you're working with a good coach who has the ability to customize a program for you, they can help you on those days. That's what we're here for, is to help you get through it. We're not necessarily here just to provide the 4 walls that are in here, but we're here to provide you with those lifestyle components to get that training done and get those components added into your life that can help you have a longer, more productive, more enjoyable time in the sport.
It's funny, I do a lot of Peloton classes. That's become my thing. I don't run anymore. I used to do a lot of running. And Ali Love is one of the Peloton instructors that I really like. And one of the things that she says in class a lot is don't miss more than one. Right? She doesn't want people to miss more than one interval or one challenge that she gives out, because it becomes easier. And I think that's a really good rule for parents when they're talking to their kids. You don't miss more than one workout, right? Because skipping one workout means all of a sudden you skip 2, then you skip 3, then you start to lose strength. And even for adults, the same thing holds true. Your consistency is what's going to hold you accountable, right? When you're consistent, you feel like you want to go, you feel good. The minute that you start to feel bad, it compounds. And the same thing happens for youth athletes.
And it goes back to like a psychological principle of identity, right? You have to identify yourself as somebody that does these things, right? You can't just get up and go, I hate training. I don't want to go train. I don't want to train. This is not what I do. I'm not a strength. I don't go lift weights. If your identity, because I'm a guy who does what I have to do so I can achieve the goal I want to achieve, and if that includes me going to the weight room, then that is my identity. That's what I identify as. I'm a guy who wants to go and do what I want to do, and I have to do the tasks because I want to do that activity. And whatever it may be. It may be a sport. It may be mountain climbing. It may be dirt bike riding.
Whatever it is, right.
Right, archery in your backyard. But you're the guy. Identify with that. Become that person, because if you're identifying as somebody else, when you step into those rooms, is there going to be this imposter element going on there, and you're never going to feel at home, and you're going to lose that enjoyment. And
my guys, my 2 oldest in particular, now college players, most of the time we don't even talk about if they're going to the gym, it's when. That's what they have decided, that they know they need it. They've learned to love grinding. They've learned to love working hard. It's become a part of their day, and it's a part of their identity. I've never said it that way, but when you say it, I recognize that. Like my son Ryan's doing an internship right now in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So he doesn't get home till 6:30. He literally comes in, goes upstairs, changes his clothes, and he comes here. There's nobody here in the evenings. He comes in and he spends an hour and a half, 2 hours. He does his lifting. He does some speed and agility. He does some shooting on the turf, and it's what he does. Yeah. And I admire that so much, and I recognize it. Right. For me, that was something that became important to me, but that has to develop in an athlete, and I think parents can help that develop, not by making them do it, but by giving them great support, so that it's
and a reflective surface. Parents, your what you do, your kids notice. Roy's entire family is athletic. My family, we all train, right? My kids don't play competitive sports at a high level. I have a high school player that plays lacrosse and field hockey in a great program. My older daughter was a competitive dancer, but we still all train. No matter where we go, everyone is doing something, and it's because they've reflected back off of my training principles and my wife's fitness routine, and it's just part of what our family does. Even if we go somewhere, we get up and we get something done for that day. Getting that in there is very important, and as an adult, if you want to maintain, you want to have that longevity too in your training. So part of what we talk about in here is that long-term athletic development. And that long-term athletic development is probably near and dearer to my heart than the performance element of it is. Sure, I want to see a kid see his goals and his dreams, but I really want to see a kid who learned how to train in here, took that, learned how to train, then trained himself into that performance element of it, had an enjoyable experience, and now he's on the other side of it. He's 24, 25 years old, and he's going to continue to train, and he wants to go figure out how to go run a marathon or, become a great weekend snowboarder or skier. And their training is going to apply to the things that they love, and they maintain that through life, and that reflects. And then you can get to be 53 years old, and if you maintain that identity as an athlete and as somebody who trains, you can still do the things you love and look at a longevity in your athletic life to get you through those stages. And it all comes from that consistency. I've done every type of training over the 40 plus years I've been training, right? I've tried fads. I've done stuff that I thought was going to work. I've power lifted. I've done the CrossFit stuff, everything you could possibly try. Martial arts, all sorts of weekend sports, and all of that is cumulative to my long-term athletic development. If I had still had the youth in my bones, I would be a better athlete than I was when I was younger, just because of that. So think about that side,
right? And I think Mike and I talk about this a lot. We both like to be outside and be active. And I don't want to play lacrosse anymore, but I still want to be able to move. I still want to feel good when I wake up in the morning. And I think for us, we talk a lot about maintaining, right? Add muscle. So you're building muscle, you're building flexibility, right? And then maintaining it, the longer that you can maintain it, and that's where this longevity thing comes in. Like for us on the other side of the coin, and Mike just turned 53, I turned 53 at the end of this month. We're not spring chickens anymore.
No.
But being able to stay active and weightlifting, and I think both of us setting an example for our kids, right? They see that that's what we've always done, and it becomes a part of the lifestyle, right? It becomes a part of your home unit and the way that your family operates. And I think, you bring up an important part. This conversation isn't just about being an elite athlete. Right. I get it. There's a lot of people that ask those questions, but being elite is a small part of the puzzle, and that's great. If that's your dream, I'm never going to tell you that you shouldn't want to do that. But at the end of the day, taking care of your body and developing yourself as long-term athletic development and looking at wellness and longevity for your kids and allowing them to have a better quality of life for a longer period of time, that's something that they can start developing now in middle school and in high school and in college, and it's going to serve them for the rest of their lives. And I think Mike and I value that, and we talk about it, and I think sometimes we just don't kind of project it out there and like let people know, hey, all of this.
Yeah, we get hung up in this performance aspect of it and the goal drive of it, and we're missing the big picture goal, which
I
is.
think parents drive that a lot. I think a lot of times when parents come in, they don't say, well, I just want my son to be
They want them to have the experience, right? They want them to win a national championship is an amazing feat, an amazing
Sports performance
feeling.
typically is why people come in the door, and then I guess we're kind of talking about some of the other benefits, right? If that doesn't work out, but you've learned to take great care of your body, and you've built muscle, and you feel good about yourself, and lifting weights also very, very strongly correlates to building self-esteem. Those two things go hand in hand. You feel better about yourself. You know that you look better. And so sometimes kids come in and 6 months later they go back out. They've got a pep in their step. They feel better about themselves, and that's a huge win. And
I can't tell you how many seventh grade and eighth grade boys have come in here, and they're not kids who identify as somebody who trains, and they've kind of been in a program, and they're in our Learn to Train program, and they're learning how to do things. And then they kind of notice that change in their physique and their change in their body type, and they get it's a driver for them. So there's no shame in the aesthetic element of it.
Absolutely.
It's going to drive you in there, as we're going through these changes, as these kids are growing, they want to look better, they want to look athletic, they want to feel better, and all of those things go together. And you
see them too, right? They walk past the mirror, and then all of a sudden they're taking a peek, and sometimes I think they don't recognize themselves.
Yeah, they don't recognize themselves, and they're growing. Like there was just an athlete who just walked in here as we hear. He was training with us last summer, and he's back now this summer, and he's probably 8 inches taller than he was last summer. And now he's in here, and he's building on that frame that he has. And I'm sure there's gonna be a few times he walks past that mirror and jacks up that t-shirt a little bit more, or you watch them pull their shirt up and look to see if they got some abs coming in there. Right. And hey, whatever gets you in here to get you to do it, we have no problem with it. We want to see it happen.
Now, this is great.
Awesome.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for having me.
We'll do more.
Yeah, that was good.